Oh, yeah,
We're recording.
Yeah. Okay.
We're recording. Hi, this is WeAreTwoSheep
I'm Vivian.
and Jennifer, and we're going to be doing an interview today over Zoom with Lori Versaci of VERSACIKNITS, who's going to be joining us in a moment. But we don't know what episode number this is,
No.
and we're doing this all via Zoom, and we're just going to upload it when we're done.
Yeah.
But we're just super excited to have a conversation with Lori,
Very
as a designer. We've met her in person, and so because of total enthusiasm for her most recent knit design and her general collection of patterns that she has on Ravelry, we thought we would like to talk to her and talk specifically about the development of her design for shawl number 10 and her process for designing it. So she'll be joining us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, we hope you enjoy the conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so we're with Lori now, and I don't know how it'll work, whose picture will show up when, while talking or whatever, but
yeah,
we have Lori Versaci with us now, and the first and only time we talked to you extensively, because we did meet you once at a Vogue Knitting Live a long time ago, but right
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But right before all this happened on International Women's Day, we met at MIAC, and we talked then. And shortly after that, your daughter got very sick.
It was only about 3 days after that my daughter's symptoms started, which was really freaky, particularly then, because there was, people didn't even realize that there really was almost no testing done yet. So none of us had much awareness at that point about how prevalence, nor do I think we do now, but that's another, that's a whole different story.
Right. So your daughter had it. And I remember when we saw that she wasn't feeling well, we kind of were doing the math like, but we saw you, Lori. How are you? How's your daughter? Wow. That it suddenly got closer probably for everybody.
Yeah.
Right around that. That was like 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. 4 now, thankfully, 4.5. And she's fine.
Oh,
and
good.
It was it was a week after her symptoms. So about 12, 13 days after I saw you guys, almost 2 weeks, that I started having symptoms.
Wow.
And I wanted to do this while we were on camera, just because it was, first of all, that my daughter could not get tested. At the time she got sick, at the point she got sick, which was something around the 10th or something of the month, what we came to find out was that New Jersey's capacity, think about that, capacity was to run 20 tests a day. Wow. And they were hoping by the end of that week to be able to do 40.
To double it, yeah.
And so a week later, when I got sick, I mean, it was just still no. And in fact, one night we ended up bringing her to the hospital, which was its own scare. And because her oxygen, pulse ox, was almost normal, and she wasn't in like super distress, her chest x-ray was clear, they sent her home, which I'm actually quite grateful for, because, who wants to be in a hospital right now? Yeah. But what I wanted to say just was that as soon as I started symptoms, I don't know if this will make people feel better or worse, but I knew what it was.
Wow.
And I knew because it's very different than anything I had ever had. And I'm actually looking back on it now, thinking that it actually started out with an earache, but not like an ear infection earache, just a weird aching. And that's how I knew it wasn't allergies.
Yeah.
But you do get, people call it shortness of breath, a tightness, but it's sort of high in your lungs, not like when you have a respiratory infection. It's a very different feel. And when you breathe, you almost can't take a full breath in. I don't know how much yoga you do, but you bring it up and you can't hold it, and it hurts. And so it was, and then you realize that you don't really have a resting breath. You don't know you're working at breathing, at least in the mild case that I have, but you can tell. All of a sudden you realize, I'm like not just resting. diaphragm is really having to work to breathe. So it was, we knew what it was. There was no real question in our mind other than not being able to get tested.
Yeah, to confirm it. How long, did it feel like that, or did it progress for you, or did you, because certainly the symptoms seem to vary.
Yeah. Mine got sort of a little bit worse every day for like a week.
Oh.
And then but not bad, just almost like they say, it was almost like a normal progression of a flu or a cold.
Right. I think
and then
is that but you couldn't know at any point. You didn't know where's
Yeah.
the point. That's for me the problem. Not so much the symptoms we hear about, but the fear around having any of them.
Right. And I guess I'm almost glad because there's so many more people talking about it now than there were. So for us, we were in a kind of unknown.
Exactly.
And my daughter was going through it, and she kind of reached her peak around when I started getting sick. And then we both at that same like week point, a little bit over a week, plateaued and just stopped progressing, but didn't get better either for about another week. And then all of a sudden, both of us, we're a week apart, but both of us, all of a sudden one day I woke up and went, oh, I'm feeling better.
Yeah. It would bite you.
Wow.
And you just feel, really good about it. But anyway, I think it's just good for people to know that it's not like, do I have it? Do I have it? As if you get symptoms that you think are just weird.
Yeah.
Because I knew almost the day I started having symptoms. I just knew what it was, even though I wasn't really sick yet.
So how are you feeling now?
I feel, I feel fine, I think.
Yeah.
I'm still a little tired,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I feel fine and grateful, of course, that I feel fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grateful to be on the other end, but my husband's still in the house with us, and we're both kind of waiting. Hopefully he's made it.
Oh.
Hopefully he made it through, and hopefully he's not a carrier, one of the people
Right.
who's carrying it around with him.
The asymptomatic.
But it did make us extremely cautious. We've been a month with gloves and masks and, the whole kabang.
Yeah. Same. Wow. We're so glad to hear you're feeling well now.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm
Definitely.
really sorry you had that.
Yeah.
I'm sort of glad now I'm on the other side,
That's how,
But,
we have friends who were sick, and again, we don't know, but it sounds like they had it, and you feel a mix of like, oh, I was so worried and sort of relieved, because if you get it once and you don't get it again, that would be like
exactly. Yep.
Other than worrying.
Yeah.
But there's so much.
Right, so let's talk about nicer things than this. I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, getting through the not knowing and not having it, but living with it around you and worrying about it, your shawl couldn't have come at a better time.
And for me too, because it hit, and it's probably been the most joyous pattern launch I've ever done.
Really?
First of all, it obviously hit some chord in people.
Yeah.
But I was not feeling well when it hit.
Wow.
And the day I launched, it's like, can I really do this? But I did. And
no, Lori.
and I was just like, it got such warm response that it was just like, oh, so it really did make me feel better too. But clearly,
can't even imagine if people even had known that in addition to liking your design, you were at home suffering. I don't even know how that would have resonated with all of us as knitters. We would have even doubled the love. But this was just genuine enthusiasm. So when we saw you at MyAct, you were wearing it.
Yes.
And I rather uncharacteristically, maybe, I don't know, you can tell me that. I just reached out and was like, what is that? Nice to meet you. And what are you wearing? I want that. And I didn't expect that you were going to say it's not even a pattern yet that's out. So that was like out of surprise. And then I was hounding you. Like, where is it, Lori? Where is it?
Politely.
And
I have to say though, that feels so good for a designer. So you don't have to worry about that, because we work in our own people keep talking about what a disruption this has all been. This has not been much of a disruption for me, my day to day.
Right.
At all. This is how I work.
Yeah. Well, weird. And I've talked to someone else this morning too, who's similarly, she almost feels guilty as an introvert, as a creative person. She's like, working quietly alone, those are good conditions to function for her. And I think for us too, that
Yeah,
we
it's
do
not
have
huge.
a lot keeping us busy. It's just
Yeah.
that little layer of fear that you're trying to keep out
Yeah.
of your
Yeah.
space that does interfere with thinking. But we are fairly introverted, so yes, reaching out to you and saying I like what you have on and I want it to, what is that? The colors were so, and it's definitely not just the colors. I'm not typically a super colorful person, but but the arrangement of them.
Yeah.
We have to talk about. One question only before I forget. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, this is possible. We're talking about the number 10 shawl. You're gonna hold it.
You've got it.
I'm gonna drool on my keyboard. Look at that.
I want to show the other one too that I've done so far.
Yeah. We have to get to that you've been.
Yeah.
You continue to change and morph it, but
Wow.
yeah, that is just stunning. And you had that on, and actually, we were already in virus territory there, so maybe it was the happiness.
I know that. Yeah.
That because Vivian keeps saying they're just so happy. The colors are so happy.
I know, watching her knit is
she's
great
been
colors.
I don't know if I can hold this up without
That's they are beautiful, aren't they? And I just fell in love with them when I don't know if you follow Hypothesis Yarn, or you probably didn't then.
No.
And was it last Christmas? Or maybe it was last summer. She started previewing the colors, and done in photographs that were all Wes Anderson, which of course I love. And I couldn't, as soon as it came out, I just bought, and I was like, what am I doing? But I was very
So I was not familiar with her before. And side confession, I'm not sure I've seen a Wes Anderson film. I actually know his work. I know the aesthetic of it and all of that.
All right, ladies, you're in quarantine. It's on your list. Honestly, you just have to. If you've never seen a Wes Anderson film, it's time. And you don't even have to worry about which one to pick. Just pick one.
Any of them, really.
So there's
any of them.
Wow. So I was familiar, and I was trying to explain my limited knowledge to Vivian, like, okay, it's a movie director, and he definitely got a very. Maybe I've seen parts of some. I'm not sure if I've seen all of one.
Just do it.
But so it wasn't even with that association that I responded to the colors.
Yeah.
So I could see where they're coming from because of his aesthetic is so strong. But so you found the yarn before you had the design. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Well, it's my least favorite question. How do you get inspired and how do you work? It's so all over the place.
Absolutely.
But in this particular case, yes, I bought the yarn. And in fact, I only bought, I think, initially one pack of the yarn of the colors. And I bought a couple of the colors in enough so that I could, like, if I really just wanted to do a yoke, which I still haven't done, or something like that, I could. I had no idea what I was going to do.
I full disclosure, I study creativity in my master's program. That's my that's my field. And so maybe for that reason, I would never ask, how do you work, or come up with an idea, but I was curious in this case, what order things happened for you, of what you encountered. So she was selling them then as already a mini skein set.
When she launched the Wes Anderson, she launched them as a mini set.
Okay.
And you could buy full skeins. So I did both. And then as I looked at the 10 colors in the mini skeins, I just ordered another set because I didn't know.
Wow.
Because I just didn't know what I was going to do. But I thought, well, I don't want to run out. And she doesn't have very money. So I just bought a second set.
Wow.
And I did start a mantra about 5 years, maybe 10 years ago. 5 years ago. I don't buy yarn anymore. Right? I just don't buy yarn. It's my own little, I go into a yarn store. I don't buy yarn. But I always find myself doing it anyway.
Yeah, I can't even imagine not.
Yeah.
So you had the yarn sitting around. Did you also already have some thoughts about a shawl design, or it really came out of the arranging the colors?
I sit with it. A lot of my designs just are things that happen when I'm sitting with it. So I guess I had already decided that it really was just going to be more fun as a shawl, using all the colors than not.
Yeah.
And there was something in the back of my head that I knew it was my 10th anniversary.
Uh-huh.
So
Mhm.
10 worked with that.
Yeah.
And then my daughter threw out number 10. You know, it says, okay, so it's got to be number 10.
Uh-huh.
And then I just sat, they were around in, I think they were actually up, it was up in my house in Maine, and they were out on the, I just had them out.
Yeah.
Right.
And no, I don't do a lot of shawls.
Mhm.
So the whole idea of the construct of a shawl is its own dilemma, to creative dilemma for me.
Uh-huh.
But I do know that there's one that I made that I then called Simple Lines.
Yeah,
That's just
I'm
this
looking at
big
it.
crescent shawl,
Yeah, I've got your
basic crescent shawl. And I have worn that particular shawl more than, because I wrap things around my neck
Mhm.
Right.
all winter long. My studio's on the 3rd floor. It's freezing cold.
Mhm.
We live in an old colonial that wasn't heated properly, so it's always cold. So I always have stuff around my neck, and that crescent shape is like my go-to shape.
Mhm.
So I think those things were sort of playing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, because I was looking at your patterns on Ravelry, and I was seeing like, oh, look, she's got these stripes here. Then she's got that crescent shawl where she's got lines going across but not connecting. Then, like I was seeing a certain building of things coming out. I think one of the reasons you strike me as one of the most interesting designers. Oh, I
Thank
should
you.
have said that from the beginning. Truly, one of the most interesting designers working, because you explore so much in your work. It's not a consistent thing happening at all. It's not oh, there's, a Lori Versaci. You explore different things through your knitting, and which I think amounts to discovering interesting things because you are going in directions and paths instead of iterations of one style.
It's actually a constant struggle, because if you look at the people who have made a living at this, which I still really haven't
Uh-huh.
made a living. I'm successful. I'm thrilled. And I did not, when I left my consulting practice, I knew that financially this was not going to be as rewarding as being a consultant in the pharmaceutical industry. But so my plan was I had to at least break even. So I've done much better than that, and it's great. But I certainly don't earn a living.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I'd have to be 22, and and just out of college, and I'd be fine. But so,
Yeah.
but the people who have made a living at it, it is they've got a design that they use, and they play with it,
Yeah.
or a few designs. And it's no diss whatsoever,
Oh,
but
no, no, no.
that's not how I work. I didn't do it. I did it as an art. So it's much more, for me, the fun of it is that exploration.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword too, because Vivian has certainly commented that to be successful commercially in terms of keeping the audience really quite happy, you have to generate quite a lot of patterns quite quickly.
Right.
Yeah, and I think satisfying that need interferes with just developing completely organic ideas of what comes to you as they come to you. Leave the yarn out and look at it with no other pressure of where's your design right now. And so I think the pull that they experience is I need to develop something. So let's it's more forcefully and I don't know, proactively done versus I'm going to let this develop as it will, and what will happen we'll see. How does it work with this in particular? Because I'm just obsessed with the shawl. So I could ask it honestly about any of them, and I'd be just as curious. But you were saying that you draw it out. You were talking to us earlier how you draw it out. So and I wasn't recording it. How different does the final one look versus your first idea about it?
Again, it really depends. So let me just give an aside. So I find that I can leapfrog in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So when at the near the beginning of my career, Shibui Yarns asked me to do a whole collection for them, 6 pieces. And I, of course, put all these time restraints on myself, and was like just forced to do, I think I did 13 designs in like 2 weeks. I drew them out and in a very structured way, and presented them to them. And I had all kinds of things come up in that way. But more normatively, I'm mulling them the way that I've described here. So I find leapfrogs happen in kind of different ways. I'm not good at drawing it out, as you said.
Yeah.
So it's things like this are much more commonly, I have the idea of it. So you guys know from my Instagram that I did a picture showing the, kind of them overlapping. So I had done that with my skeins of yarn. So I had an idea, but when I started knitting it, it didn't really, there were a lot of questions of how to do those lines.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of knit it, do a line, knit it, and then the line wasn't right. And so how do I get them to open up like that? So initially I was doing lines that were curved. So like I'd move my line every other row a stitch.
Yeah. I see. Yeah.
And that looked awful, just so you know.
Did you take pictures of that?
I don't think I did. I know it would be fun. Wouldn't it have been more fun to do pictures? But I feel so stupid because it looks bad. So I just want to get it gone. I'm just ripping it out.
Oh, that would be beyond. Okay.
It would be interesting. You're right. So I did a lot of different, and I don't, the other thing I don't do, which I kick myself for every time, I don't just do a teeny one.
Oh, yeah.
I do the whole thing. And I do this with sweaters too. I'll do the whole thing and then, oh, that doesn't look right, and tear the whole thing out. So I'm very, I think it's just a tactile thing for me. I have to feel it. And as I said to you, I lay out all the colors, but somehow it hadn't occurred to me that halfway through I was going to have to flip them if I was. So you'll notice that, I'll just do it here. When you're first doing it, B and C, and when you get far enough into it, it becomes B and C.
Yeah,
I see.
So there are things like that, the actual properties of it that kind of unveiled as I went along.
Yeah, no, I think it was very interesting how you worked with kind of contradictions and harmony at the same time, or balance, especially because the one thing I remember about Wes Anderson is that he is obsessed with symmetry and a very symmetrical, if you freeze most of his pictures, there's this incredible balance that he maintains, and you both have it and relax it a little bit, or you manipulate it.
I'll be really interested to hear after you've actually watched one of his movies, because I think it's perfect. But I think they're always perfect in a just off way. That's my perception of it. I'm not.
You translate.
Interesting to hear from you. So I think in some ways this actually reflected that even better than I might have expected. But I learned so much in the process of doing this one. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I ripped back. I don't know. It would be embarrassing to tell you.
Well, but I'm just thinking, so you knew you were going to work with 10 colors.
I did.
You knew you were going to repeat them.
Yes.
And break them up, but repeat them. And I'm very curious, I must say, as I'm knitting the stripes, when did you decide the width of them? Because that also, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's a 10 bumps, for lack of a better word. Ridges, I think.
Right, ridges, yeah. That was, again, an aesthetic decision that I made after I started knitting.
It wasn't for the 10.
No, but it should have been.
Yes, it was.
Because of the 10.
Yes.
10 over and over and over again.
As I was counting, where am I in the stripe? And I'm like, 10.
Yeah. No, I think that was proportion. I wasn't really sure how it would.
Beautifully.
Yeah.
And the decision I made that affected a lot of it was where to show the 10 stripe colors. So you'll note that the 10 colors are shown on the outsides, And the center portion is only 5 colors repeated.
Oh, look
I'll
at
have
that.
to, I believe you. Well, I can see the colors don't
Right.
go through. So
You
wow.
can see it better in this one only because I chose to do all dark in the
Right,
middle.
you were talking about that, and that absolutely makes very much a visual structure. I see that there, stacked like that.
So in the second one, when I knew what it was going to look like, I was able to be more purposeful with how I organized it. And so I had to make a decision at 5 stripes sets in.
Yeah.
Originally, I had thought I was going to do the center be 10 colors.
Oh, wow.
But I hadn't really realized how much more there would be on the sides.
Yeah.
And I decided that the sides were going to look unbalanced if they didn't contain all the colors. But that was, again, something that really struck me. If I could discipline myself and know beforehand, if I was an artist as opposed to a textile artist, I probably could draw, if I could draw and really knew could figure out the proportions in advance, I would have been able to figure all that out in advance. But I like doing it on the needles.
Well, okay, but that being said, the counter argument to that is that if you are saying if you had been able to do all that in advance and you would have done it differently, I wouldn't have this shawl.
It would have been a different shawl.
So that's problematic for me as one of your. No, I think this is the best of both worlds. You did this in this very tactile, organic way. You worked it out. You wrestled with the problems as they came up and resolved them the way you chose to. I think the effect is so stunning.
It is.
Well, I think to me, the most exciting thing that's happened is the number of people. So then I put it out for test knit. I did it in a very small test knit group because of I didn't go out to 10 million people because it becomes very difficult. And so I just went to a group of people who I know knit really well, because my other challenge with this was I did know that the directions were going to be a little spicy and they had to be really, really clean.
Okay.
So my tech editor and I had gone through a couple iterations of the pattern. And so just from the amount that she worked on it with me, the number of iterations we had back and forth, it became clear that clarity was just, we're working with 10 colors. We've got intarsia going on there. It just needed to be really clean. So I just went out to, I guess, 5 people who I really trust. A couple store owners who've knit forever, just some people I really trust. And I didn't go to them because of their aesthetics. In fact, 2 of the people, their aesthetics totally different than mine. And some people pulled out these colors and it was 10 colors. And I was like, I'm not sure. And so the most wonderful thing about it is none of them have come out badly.
Yeah.
That is
so it's really fun because everybody's take on it, even when they haven't used my colors, has been really great.
So now, but did they use your original balancing or your newer one?
They had the shawl that you have.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
They had the photograph of that, but they all used their own colors.
But they balanced it the same way you had of where to put the darker colors or heavier.
Not really. Everybody has done, if you go and, we're doing a knit along in my Ravelry group, it's very low key and it's not, well, you've been there.
Oh, yeah.
And you've seen, people are just sort of throwing their colors out there.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're coming up really fun.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying it. I have to say, I don't usually knit things more than I guess most of my shawls I've knit twice, but in general, I don't re-knit my own work because got to get that next pattern out, right? Yeah. And now I did 2. The Mayak one I sent to a friend to knit for me after I had done the layout. And now I'm laying out another one. Wow. And it's really, and I'm going to do this one the exact opposite of what I did with the Woolfolk one. Well, not exactly opposite. I'm not going to collect all the darks. I'm going to purposefully go with lighter value, darker value, lighter value. So it's still going to be purposeful in a way that my original one wasn't quite as purposeful, and see how that one comes out.
Yeah, I can't identify why that to my I mean, actually looking at it this way, I see the shape more in the center. When I just look at it, just see all the colors and they're happy and I'm happy, which is a miracle. So
Well, and like you said, I think it's really interesting the first part being flipped for the bottom part, that the red's over here and then it's up over there. I think that's interesting.
yes, and yet none of it draws the eye to any one particular place, which I think is also quite relieving, that you can just move around it and take in all of it and just be happy. To your point about the instructions, I must say it was also striking me. I think before I even asked you if you wanted to talk about it, maybe that filled me with more good feelings towards you. It's a good pattern.
Thank you.
Really, yeah.
I have an extraordinary tech editor.
Well, and you obviously incorporated though whatever advice you got, which is
well, and she's just spectacular. And then when I go out for test knit, I find it. I mean, I only really test knit to get the pattern. Well, find little errors, because there are always little errors even after we've tech edited it and sent it back and forth 3 or 4 times. But to get little verbiage changes, there weren't. My tech editor is very, very experienced. I'm really blessed to have found her. And she actually, between the two of us, I think we got it pretty clean to start with. Yeah. But that's, I think it's the piece that people don't appreciate, is having a good tech editor makes all the difference in the world.
Huh. Yeah, no, I have found it. There's no stage in the instructions where I'm double what? Huh? No, it comes out just when I need it as well. But it's also, and I never am good about reading my patterns. You always say you can just read the pattern, meaning read your own work and figure. I never can do that. And this I absolutely can.
Good.
Which is also the strength of the design. I think that I get it, but the language in it, very helpful, very easy to follow.
Thank you.
I must say. So it's a pleasure in 2 fronts, which is.
So what I haven't done yet, and I don't know what you're doing, but so I'm going to do a little. I hate doing the videos, and they're so awful, but people like them. But Intarsia, I have no idea why people are intimidated by Intarsia. I'm self-taught, so I just all made myself figure it out. So
I heard you say that in the video. You mentioned being self-taught and that your cast on was going to be like weird or something. I'm also self-taught, so I very much that resonated with me. But I think anytime there's a word for a technique, it's scary.
Yeah, I have to say I have not learned Intarsia yet, and I am intimidated by it, I have to say.
Yeah, I keep telling her. No.
Under and up. You just take your new yarn under the old.
Right. Yeah.
And work it. That's all it is. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's interesting how techniques get that
yeah,
vibe
I think
them.
the essence of having a name to point to and say I'm ignorant about it, that you can put a square around it and point to it. That's it. Then I can't do. How often can you point to the thing that you can say I can't do that? When yes, if we ask you, can you do this over under? Well, yes, I can do that. Well, then we can call that Intarsia.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'm going to do a video for is I wove in all my ends as I went.
What you said, yeah.
I didn't have to weave anything in. And so I'm going to try to do something on that too, just
I'm curious to see your video about it, but I don't actually mind weaving in ends. I find it a little bit of a peaceful closure to my project. I'm a freak that way. So I'm not too worried about it, but yeah, look at all that.
I just flip them under as I go on that row, so that I mean, literally, I didn't have to weave. I wove like 2 things in at the end, which was kind of nice.
Yeah,
wow.
I don't feel intimidated by the weaving, and I kind of will like that moment of, oh, there's a little gap. Oh wait, I'll weave in that end and whoop, suck in that hole. Do you
like to seam?
I don't mind it.
I know, me too.
I don't go out of my way to do it, but I certainly don't mind it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, me too.
It is very interesting.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's always interesting to learn something new, or you have a technique and sometimes I might want to use it, and by the end I might want to use it. That is a lot of
You're right at the beginning still. It does get, the rows get really long. And I actually on my Woolfolk one, I did an extra row, an extra stripe. I had more yarn because I had 50 um, 50 gram skeins that was, it had yardage. And I wanted the red to come up a third time. I just felt like I had to have the red come a third time.
No, and yes.
It does look very balanced.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you hold up your hand and cut it off, it ends with the dark black. And if you end
sort of blah. So I figured I had to have it. And I'm going to just tell you that when I got to that point and I realized that it was an extra set of stripes, I just went, really? And I really thought I had calculated it so that the end would be red. But there are 12 stripes, not 13. I kept thinking, oh, there are 13 stripes. This is going to be perfect. And then all of a sudden I got to the end. I'm like, I can't believe I'm knitting these huge long, you're over 500 stitches. You're like, what am I doing?
Don't tell me that. I'm not sure if mine, I don't know what needle size I used or whatever.
Yeah, you're a tight knitter.
I'm a tight knitter, so we'll see what dimensions I end up with. The little handkerchief.
That's why people like shawls, is that you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah, it'll just be
true.
Whatever it'll be, but it is just.
I know. And it was interesting to me to go back to something you said a little earlier, that you started this designing it so much earlier, not in this environment.
Right. Not in order to make us all happy.
Right. Yes. But it was interesting to me that you started, what was it, in the summer you mentioned?
I actually cast on, I think I cast on, it was just when it was starting. It was probably at Christmas time. Now I'm feeling very good, but I know I was in our house in Maine. That's all I know.
Right. Yeah. But that's a whole other level of what started it versus how it affects us when she's done with it.
Yeah.
The world keeps changing in that time.
We were not in the midst of this. We might have been starting to feel it a little bit. I actually pushed this out fast because I thought it would cheer people. It was a good one for now. And the timing, we've had such a mild winter anyway. Sweater season really
didn't happen.
Was seriously curtailed this summer. For those of us who mostly design sweaters, it was a tough one.
Yeah. No,
and the yarn stores, I'm sure. Ugh.
Yeah. I don't know. That doesn't affect our knitting, but yes, the wearing of the wool, but not the knitting. No.
Well, some people do only knit in the winter. A lot of people only knit in the winter.
Oh, I could never.
I know. I really couldn't.
No.
Well, it would be odd to put it away and then bring it back out. It's around.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We're perma-knitters. Oh yeah, and I'm looking at your other designs too, and you just released that. No, is it actually out yet? The sweater, the pattern for the short sleeve sweater.
No, I'm working on it. I've just torn out one of the sleeves. See, this is the same thing. That's another one that's been in the works for a long, long time in a lot of different iterations before I got to it, because I don't typically do top down. I'm not a all in one piece top down thing.
Yeah.
But that one's interesting. I don't know whether I even have it up here. It's a little different design because you do the whole yoke just with regular raglans. You don't do any short rows at all, but you put a gusset in the back. So you get to the point where your sleeves have enough stitches on. Well, you've got the right number of stitches for between sleeve and body. You take it, you then knit just the back stitches for a while.
Yeah.
About this much in the back, which helps the tilt, right? So that the front is that tilt. Yeah, whichever way you want to do it. And then you join the body and do the sleeves. And it's really, it's a Japanese thing. I actually got it from looking at Japanese patterns, and I did a baby pattern playtime where I used it. And so now I've been wanting for a long time to figure out how you would do it on adult sweaters. The reason that I don't do a lot of raglans in particular is that it's predicated on the idea that you're increasing both sides of a line.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
If you're larger and you think about how far out that line has to go,
The sleeve.
not really, your sleeves become huge.
Yeah.
I see. Right.
And then if you're very small, you're way up here.
Yeah.
And so by having that gusset in the back, you can really control a lot more how deep you go before you start the stitches. And I think I haven't finished doing all the calculations,
Yeah.
but it's actually kind of a fun thing. So what I did in the back of that was I added a different stripe pattern in the gusset. And if you really look at the pictures, you'll notice on the short sleeve version, the stripes keep going more.
I pointed out that a color looked different.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so on the short sleeve version, I just made it that one, so that there's lots of stripes on the sleeve. But I actually undid one of the sleeves because I think I'm gonna launch it to be long, 3/4, and short.
Okay.
And so since I'm not gonna be able to get it photographed, I'm gonna end up photographing on my dress form, and I'm gonna leave 1 3/4 length, which is the length I'm gonna want, and 1 short so people can see. Yeah, I've had photographers sort of offer, oh, I can keep a distance, and I'm thinking you can't keep a distance doing a photo shoot. You got to fix the sweater.
So the best if you knew someone, you could mail it to them, but you could, you don't know.
Well, that's what I sometimes do that with Gail Zucker in Connecticut, but she still has to have a model. She still has to have someone doing lighting,
Yeah.
Right.
I may do an outdoor shoot with a friend of mine, just on me, just for the heck of it, but I think I'm actually going to do it on a dress form.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be interesting challenges.
Yeah, what's affected by
the
this.
unexpected, like what else do we have to invent here? Solutions.
That's okay, I can keep working, a lot of people can't keep working, so.
For sure. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear though that that's not going to slow down the release of that pattern, because I quite like
No, it's a fun one too. I realize that I just got to keep using it. This is a really good time for bright colors.
Yeah.
And more fun things.
Yeah.
Look, that. Sorry, my dog came up and one of my 3 dogs came up.
Nosing into the action there.
Cozy, she went right into the yarn. Hey, Dot.
Okay. I don't even know, cause I feel like I could ask you many more questions going down many different roads. I don't know how long have we, I don't want to.
Well, I guess we started a little after 3, right? So.
I guess just to squeeze in here, even though I know it's opening up a whole other conversation, is that you mentioned about shifting from one field of work into another, and then you completely inappropriately referred to yourself as not an artist. We won't.
No, I didn't. I said that anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you said fiber artist, but what made you start designing?
I've always knit.
Yeah.
And
self-taught starting when? Sorry, that's an interesting.
My mother taught me probably when I was 7 or 8 years old. She taught me to knit, purl, and do a cable. That's the extent of my teaching. And she didn't really knit very much, but I knit. And I, right from the get-go, when I cook, I think recipes are a suggestion. And I felt the same way about patterns. And I never swatched. I never did gauge. Thankfully, when I was coming up, Rowan had just started their yarn, and they had a beautiful pattern book and beautiful colors yarns. And I must be at a gauge that's very similar to theirs, because I could get away with just knitting. But the first thing I really knit of any magnitude was I was in a carpool in high school when I was 14, and I knit each of my carpool mates mittens for Christmas, and I made them all different. I customized them.
Yeah.
So I'd always done that, and I always had knitting projects. And I'm from a family, my mother was the curator of the art gallery at Brown University. My father was a plastic surgeon, but he was a collector. So we always had artists in the house. We were just, and I'm the only one of my siblings who didn't go into some. My two brothers are architects. My sister did accessory design for years. And so I was the one who felt like I should, so what I used to say was, someone's going to have to pay for all this. So I went to business school.
Wow.
Finance and accounting, and then into marketing. And so I think that knitting was always an outlet. And to be perfectly honest, what really happened was I also was, I'm going to say delusional, and I don't really mean that, but I had 4 children. So came a point, and I was a consultant. We own a consulting practice. My husband and I started a consulting practice. So I had clients and deadlines and travel and, all of that, and a nanny and an au pair. And because I had these 4 children, and my mother became a little bit needy as she grew older, and I just could not, there was no way I could continue all of that. And I had started knitting a lot more and designing things for my kids and designing a lot more. Once my children were, I guess Hester was, maybe 9, 10, when, they aren't so needy, I started knitting again, and I started designing. And finally I just said, there's not enough balls in the world, hands in the world playing with, for me to do it all. And so I started designing, and I was really lucky right out of the box. I had maybe 5 designs that I had done but hadn't published, and I submitted pictures of them to Nitty Magazine. I don't know, it's an online, nitty.com. And they took one, and that was it. Then from that, just, then all of a sudden, I've got to be on Ravelry. I've got to have, and I was off.
So that was 10 years ago.
Yep. I'm just finishing my 10th year. Yep. So I was very lucky. And then Shibui picked me up and I did a bunch of work with them, both independently and actually with them. And just went from there. But I'm lucky because the thing I think, because I actually look at it as being more artistic than a job.
Yeah.
I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I finally decided that I really wanted to work. I've been following a lot of indie dyers, and it's more now, it's accepted than maybe 4 or 5 years ago that you just do collaborations with them. The way it was much more, and I'm not young, so it wasn't sort of a natural thing for me to have friends who were indie dyers to be working with. And I just one day went, I just want to see those yarns. And so I started just working a lot with indie dyers. And whereas before my business had been more sort of established brands and working with directly more closely with yarn stores, I kind of said, but I want to be doing it a little differently. And so I started working much more now with indie dyers, just yarns and people and things that I like, that are interesting to me. Colors.
Certainly the palette for this one is just such a driving force.
I know for a lot of your designs, the color is really, I don't know, it speaks. Especially where the Hester's hat.
Oh, that's down here.
Down.
Well, that's a Woolfolk yarn. So she is Kristen Ford, who had been at Shibui when I worked with her, and was their head of marketing and at Shibui, and did all their colors for years. She left and established Woolfolk, which is sort of an in-between. I guess it's an established, except it's very it's all about sustainable farming. They brought back an old heritage line of sheep and from Patagonia, and so now they've brought back this heritage brand, and she's the only supplier of that particular yarn. But she is a real queen of color. I mean, that's why I did one of these shawls in the wool folk yarn, because the colors just such a gorgeous palette to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But not usually a lot, not considered colorful. And that was one of the fun things about doing those hats, is that it was fun to take her yarns, which aren't considered is very toned down color palette, but mix them so that they're really bright.
Talking about those?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at all of them and
Yeah. It's interesting how you do, there's lots of color, but then also does texture influence you? Because your luminous shawl, right, has the stripes of mohair, which is interesting.
I think before, sort of color and texture have always been my two things. Early on, I could spend like a whole week taking Barbara Walker's patterns, texture,
Mm-hmm.
and just knitting. And I have still long, almost like scarves of just different
like
her pattern. Yeah, just texture patterns. And so I really started pretty early on. I got a textured, there's a little book called Baby Sweet. Well, Textured Kids and Textured Baby Sweet that I did, because I realized after I did those little swatches, but it was a continuous swatch.
Yes.
I would go to put it into a sweater, and I realized that doing baby sweaters was a really good way of gaining my experience, because as I said, I have to have experience with how it works.
Yeah.
But gaining experience in how what happened in a garment when you use that texture. And then that turned into a whole lot of sweaters. So a lot of my early sweaters are various texture patterns.
Yeah. But then you also play with tons of different construction and structure, because like that join there on lateral is just seems architectural.
This is so fun, because that's it. You guys have like hit my three favorite topics.
It's and my God, I mean, I don't know how to pronounce it quite. I might do it wrong.
Vendre, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you see it.
Yeah, the ribbing
going in and the shaping and.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of shaping and how you can shape in different ways so like the idea of putting a gusset in the back.
Yeah.
Just different ways of constructing and how can you even do it? One of the sweaters in their form, I did a collar that's a boat collar, but it's a 1x1 rib, and you like do 2 panels of 1x1 rib and then overlay them on top of each other to create
I was admiring the construction.
to create the top of your shoulder.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really fascinating how you can do this craft that is literally a series of knit stitches and purl stitches. That is all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And manipulate it to be so different. I think it's why I like garments so much, because you can even just like, how do you even put a pocket into something? And what are all the different ways of including, from putting it on after, so an afterthought, to making it integral to the structure itself, to having, there's just tons of different ways of doing a pocket.
Yeah.
And I just think it's fascinating. It's been fascinating. It continues to fascinate me.
Yeah. I think that's what comes across, like I said, about the variety of what you're exploring. I think because you ask, I almost feel like I can tell that there's a question that you start with, when you're approaching it. You're like, I'm going to solve this here,
Well, I have one that I've been working on. Well, I like doing pieces from the bottom up, and people don't like doing that. So I knit the sweater pieces and the bottom up. And then I said, okay, but then how would I do that if I did it all in one piece from the bottom up? And I redid the sweater. It's been a challenge. I haven't published it yet because the writing of a pattern that you providing it that people can knit it either way.
Yeah.
So the second version I did, it's all in one piece, bottom up. And so that was one. But this is one that I think I don't even know if you can see it. It's dark, so it might be hard.
Some of it.
But see, I wanted it to be a really big shawl collar.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can really
See
it.
that
Cardigan.
down the shoulder. Yeah.
And the texture on the shawl collar.
So the texture on the shawl collar and then there. But when I got near the top, I had the issue of how do I now turn that into a collar? And I did something I've never done, which is that I added stitches to the shoulder here.
Wow.
See that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
and it was my way of being able to create a shoulder. And actually, unbeknownst to me, it fits better. So it's sort of like that when you were talking about where it, I don't know whether it's lateral or lineage, but where the collar, the shoulder is
lateral.
Lateral, where it flips over.
Yeah.
This was like a whole nother version of that same thing. And it's a detail no one's ever going to notice, but it was so interesting to just try to figure out because the front panels are so wide.
Yeah.
You know, kind of interrupts this flow.
Yeah.
I realized that if I just brought that panel in, that collar, started the curve of the collar on the shoulder, I could wrap it around the neck. Otherwise, I didn't have enough stitches on my shoulder to sit on the shoulder.
So this was the sweater that you first knit in pieces?
I'm talking about two different sweaters. Completely confused the hell out of you.
No. Well, only because it resonates with me. I'm trying to knit a sweater right now with no pattern at all. And I didn't have any idea actually when I started. I thought I was going to let the yarn be my partner is how it's working out. So input is going, or coming from the yarn as well as I go. But I definitely prefer doing it bottom up when I do that.
Yes. I find it's a lot easier for me to play with design bottom up than top down. Top down, you're already stuck, right? Whatever you do up here, you're stuck. So maybe that is why I prefer bottom up. I have one sweater from one garment years and years and years ago, modern tunic. And it started as sort of an oversized sweater. And while on the needles, turned into a tunic, with shapes and with pockets. Like what, but it was a bottom up. And so I could play with those ideas as I went.
Yeah. Because now this is my second time doing a sweater without any pattern at all and doing it just as I go. And definitely the bottom up, when I've tried doing it from the top down, like, as you say, you're sort of stuck immediately. And the bottom up, it leaves open just places to play. And
I agree.
Wow.
I agree.
And I hadn't noticed till you said when we started that, shawls weren't, I mean, I see them, they're here. You have shawls and beautiful ones. But it's interesting that this time with all the colors you wanted to put in, you chose a shawl.
I find it, multicolored sweaters are challenging to me. I'm actually I'm grappling with turning this concept from 10 into a sweater.
Yeah.
But I'm not really a big yoke person.
Yeah.
And I think I have a lot of things I did really early on, broken stripes, random stripes that change halfway through a line that, which I thought about bringing back, but it's really hard for me, particularly since I do sizes from extra small all the way to 3X and that's confining in and of itself, because whatever you do, it's got to be upscale. You've got to be able to scale it up onto bigger and smaller canvases, which is a challenge in color. The way I like to work it with color anyway.
And keeping the details that you do want stable. Yeah, translating that.
So you've either got to be willing to do something that the writing of the pattern would be impossible, which is to, like, if you think about taking something in a program, a photograph, and just growing it and reducing it, which is what you would want to do.
Yeah.
But writing a pattern that accommodated all that would be really hard. Really hard.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, so now you've got to try to write one of your sweaters up.
Yeah, that I've never done. I'm more like, oh, that worked. That was fun. And then that's.
My daughter gets furious when she was somewhere and somebody, like at a Starbucks or something, and somebody next to her, they were knitters, and they're like, you know, she wants $8 for that pattern. Like, I don't know, what does she think? And Molly said it was all she could do not to just say, do you have any idea what goes into writing a pattern? And the price point of pattern, I guess since I started sewing more and realized that sewing patterns are, you know, 2 or 3 times more than a knitting pattern.
Yeah.
And some might argue it's easier because it's literally, you know, but the reality of our business is that yarn manufacturers ruled, and they make so much more money. You know, I have designs where the yarn is $300, which is horrible if you bought, you know, if you can't afford it.
Yeah.
But even in the least expensive, a sweater of yarn is upward of $100, right?
Yeah.
And the pattern's 8, 7, 8. So
Yeah.
it's you know, the power's in a different place.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because without the pattern, that yarn doesn't turn into anything.
There you go. That's not a good end point.
Well, it's a celebration of fantastic patterns and pattern makers.
Yeah, appreciating the work you put into it.
The designers,
it's huge. It is big work. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the whole thing that sparked this conversation was my obsession with your design again, and the pleasure of the yarns. I did order the hypothesis set because I wanted what you had on. It was like, nope, that's what I need to have. And then you released the gorgeous photos. So yes, I want all of it.
Gail Zucker did the photographs. She's in Connecticut, and she's been a real joy because, in fact, in the end, the photography is the part that I find the most intimidating, which is very peculiar for someone as artistically oriented as I am. Like, that should be a piece of cake. But it's expensive to start with. You know, there's just a lot of different pieces, and it's not my forte. So she started doing co-op days where you can send her things in the mail, and she puts together the models and does the photography and stuff. And that's been really great because she's so good.
Yeah.
So,
well, it shows it beautifully because it just is stunning. And I did get the yarns, and it's a joy to look at them. I'm enjoying it as it goes. There's not a bad moment. I love how you wrote it.
And I'd encourage people that we've got I've been putting up. There've been 3 or 4 yarn companies that have done really lovely, really beautiful sets too.
Well, and also people haven't looked at the Ravelry group because people are showing what they're combining and bringing to it. And so I think it's a really offers a very interesting opportunity to make a very thoughtful collection from a person's stash.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I can do this because I'm not very good at this, but I'll try. So on the floor, that's Dot.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not doing a very good job.
No, we see it. I see. Yeah.
So there are the colors. This is Lichen and, come on, you guys know.
Lichen and Lace.
Lichen and Lace.
Yeah, Canadian.
And I've had them for a long time. It turns out I had 13 colors.
Ooh.
Oh.
I'm very fond of buying one skein of each. I believe that, particularly for sweater knitters, go out and find three yarns you like that you think you might want to knit this sweater in, and swatch the 3 and see which one you like better before you buy a full sweater's worth. So I've just been following. She's one of the people I've been following for years because I really love her colors. And so I realized, oh, I probably have, and then I have 13 colors. So I just started playing with them this morning, and to do my 4th one.
Oh my gosh.
It is the other thing that's nice about this shawl for right now. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm having a lot of trouble with detailed knitting. Anybody else?
Not with my knitting, but with my other life work. Yes. Yes. Any kind of really concentrating. Well, actually to that point, yes. So the sweater from the bottom up where I have to make decisions. It's like, let's do this instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm having trouble writing my patterns up, just
Yeah.
getting the mind space to
Yeah.
just, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm falling into knitting another one more out of, oh, I can be knitting.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the satisfaction with this is that while it is not, as you say, it's not like anything tricky going on, but since it changes, it's interesting and stimulating. It's
Exactly.
the best of both worlds right now, because
Yeah.
I couldn't just knit a one color shawl right now.
Right.
That's not what I need.
But it's completely mindless in one sense, and stunningly interesting to watch in another sense. So yeah, I think it's really proven very fortunate timing.
And
Very
valuable.
fortunate
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah. For that, I would just like to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we've been talking about the number 10 shawl by Versaci Knits, and we will put that information below the video.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And but post a link to the number 10 group,
for
because
Ravelry.
I think they might find it fun too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we've got people coming in and out of that a lot. We've got a ton of readers
Yeah.
that aren't talking.
Yeah.
So we've only got maybe 20 people talking,
Really?
but there are like 150 people reading.
Huh.
So it's and I've never had it be that much. So people are checking in, which is fun. That's good.
No, that's interesting too, though, just to see how the numbers change. I was looking at how many people heart a project, how many people leave a comment. Like, I just don't use Ravelry that way. Vivian's much more Ravelry savvy. And that's been interesting to see, yeah, what resonates. And I'll be interested to see how, I don't know, number 9 is still relatively new.
10.
Yes.
10. Did I say number?
Number 9 has its own thing going.
Oh, number 10.
Yes, it's new. It's just been a couple weeks, maybe 3 at most.
Okay.
So yeah, it's new.
Yeah. And I did see that Hypothesis Yarns didn't seem prepared for the...
That she was not, that's the other thing. Well, and on her behalf, I've launched a shawl pattern thinking, and the specific yarn company has maybe 10, 15.
Yeah.
So I think that there's so much volatility.
Oh yeah. I mean, for one thing, it wasn't even new yarn for her. Like, there'd be no reason to expect that this was...
Well, I had been in touch with her. So that's why but she hadn't done she's small, and she hadn't, it's hard for her to do the mini skeins. She doesn't have an automated system where she can just stick it on and it will do it for her. So she has to do it by hand. And so,
right. So it's doing it much more.
So she only had a certain number, but she immediately did a second load of them and is waiting for yarn for a third load. So I really hope for her that the yarn comes in.
Wonderful business for her too. I mean, you're having this really nice ripple effect, the enthusiasm for it, but it was really quite amusing and in a very positive way, because it's nice to hear also about business that's, doing well right now. That she was saying like, oh my gosh, that sold out. And then pre-orders available. Okay, those have sold out. Like,
Good for her.
And
I'm really pleased.
I do think it's wonderful that your Ravelry group also reflects the other ways people could bring in their own yarn. Absolutely. I can't explain why for me this was like completely.
Yeah, no, I understand it completely. And I also think it's been great for people. That was one of the things that was nice about my test knitters, was that they all went into their stash.
Yeah.
And so just to see what people, and some people are very persnickety about it's got to be the same brand. But there are a couple people in there who have like really dove and have one person has a DK DK with her with 3 different weights of yarn going.
Yeah. And so then, if a person wanted to, they could throw texture in there as well, I suppose, if they want to. Well,
and one of my test knitters made it in worsted weight as a big, like almost a blanket to have on the back of her couch.
Wow.
Wow.
So people have been doing different things, which is fun.
Yeah.
Fun for me.
It is interesting how much variety you can get within that pattern.
Right. Well, I guess that's another benefit of you doing it in the shawl, right? Because in a sweater, you couldn't necessarily play with pleats like that.
Quite the same.
Yeah.
You know? That's true.
You're right.
I might try.
You're right. But that's interesting that you can chain a lot is flexible on the shawl. Yeah.
Yeah, to bring a lot of personal choice to it.
Yeah.
Just stunning.
Thank you.
Dot. Yeah.
Yeah, Dot just got up and left. My other two didn't
That's
come.
fine.
No.
Okay. Be well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah. I really
Anytime. Stay healthy. Keep writing keep active in the group.
And we have a date. We have a date unspecified as of now to go to the yarn store.
Yes. She's so sweet. We're talking about Wild Hand, which is a young woman who started, she's not really, not Vivian Young, but a young woman who kind of cashed it in, and she has little kids and started this, I'm going to call it a fiber store. And they do macrame and just weaving and, but a really small store, but beautifully curated, and just there's the incredibly diverse neighborhood, really diverse staff, and just it is the new what yarn stores our local yarn stores are going to be like, which are not going to be just yarn stores anymore.
Yeah. I think
really lovely.
Her Instagram looks fantastic. She's been lovely. I've communicated with her too. Very nice.
Yeah, she's really sweet, and I cannot just put all my force against her because I just think she's the future of it, and it's great.
Wow, that's a great direction.
Wild Hand.
That's what we'll all go enjoy.
Yeah.
Sooner than later. Okay.
Take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.